Hello, people of the internet. 2014 M here, and welcome back to the storybook. Today we are going to be reading Chapter 2 of Legend of the Ghost Dog, so let's get started. It happened so fast, I just didn't have time to react. I had followed the old path for a good mile or so, taking my time and stopping often to get my bearings. The sky seemed so huge in Alaska, and the landscape felt far more open and remote than any I'd ever encountered hiking back at home. There was a hard edge to everything here. The sun beamed brighter, the air seemed colder, and the sky was much bluer than what I was used to. I was glad I had packed my camera. I wanted to take pictures of everything, but pictures might not fully show up how it felt here, how vast and wild, wonderful, and a little dangerous. I had reached a place where the open tundra turned to bushes and shrubs, and beyond that gave way to trees. I wasn't tired, but I had promised to take care of dinner, so I decided it was time to turn around and head back home. Henry did not agree. The path branched off into a second, much fainter trail, and Henry was very interested in something that lay in that direction. I wasn't sure what kind of wildlife lived around here, but chances were he'd gotten scent of rabbit or deer. "Come on, Betty," I told him, pulling on the leash. "You've got a nice supper waiting for you in your bowl back home, and you won't even have to run and catch it. Let's go." Beagles are notoriously stubborn creatures, and Henry was their king. He didn't want to go back. He strained on the leash with his whole body, while I pulled back in the opposite direction. It was like being in a tug-of-war with a hippopotamus. My usually devoted dog flat out refused to budge, and I made the mistake of losing my patience. "We're going now," I snapped, turning my back on him and taking a few steps. Henry spun around toward me as I yanked on the leash, then suddenly began wiggling and moving backward. In one slick movement he managed to slip out of his collar. I fell onto the grass as Henry dashed down the path. "Henry, no!" I cried, jumping to my feet. This was bad. The few times Henry had gotten loose on hikes back home, he'd taken off for hours before returning. That's just the way beagles are. But this was not home. This was wilderness. If Henry got lost here, he might never find his way back. He wasn't even wearing his collar and tags now. He might cross paths with a wolf or a bear. The thought of losing my dog filled me with panic. I tore down the path after him, shouting his name. I ran until I was so out of breath I couldn't yell for him any longer. I couldn't have been more than 40 degrees out. My lungs stung with cold and my eyes filled with tears. "Henry!" I called hoarsely. "Come on, boy!" The answer was silence, except for the whisper of wind moving through the trees. The worst thing I could do was keep going forward. I wasn't going to help my dog by getting lost myself. The path ahead went over a small hill. I decided to walk to the top and have a look on the other side. One final attempt to find Henry. But after that I had no choice. I would have to turn back and go home, and trust him to use his sensitive nose to find his way back. When I reached the top of the rise, I almost cried out with relief. Henry was at the bottom of the hill. I walked slowly and quietly toward him, not wanting him to notice me and dash off again. But Henry wasn't going anywhere. He was crouched low to the ground, staring intently at something. His body was quivering. What had he found? I walked carefully toward him, my eyes scanning the ground. When I reached him, he turned suddenly and pressed himself into my leg, whimpering. I knelt down and slipped the collar over his head. He trembled and whined softly. His eyes still fixed on a spot nearby, but all I could see were a few bushes and what appeared to be an old piece of wood. "What are you looking at, you silly boy?" I asked him, trying to keep the nervousness out of my voice. "You can't go running off like that. Come on, let's go home. I'll get your supper." Henry had lost all of his bullish strength. He meekly followed me back to the hill, his head low and his tail firmly between his legs. As we reached the top, I turned to glance back one more time. This time I noticed something. movement in the brush, a glimpse of something sleek and dark as a shadow. Though I couldn't make out what it was, I had a distinct feeling I was being watched. A little shudder ran up my spine, and one fluid movement the thing was gone, like a sea serpent returning to the depths. My heart pounding, I retraced my steps back to the main path, without any trouble. Henry perked up a little as we made our way back home, but I was still troubled by what I'd seen, or what had seen me. What in the world was back there, staring at me so hard I could feel it? My stomach rumbled, and I realized I was starving, on top of being scared silly. I'd have to leave the mystery to be investigated some other day. That was kind of a short chapter. I'm gonna look how many pages chapter 3 is. It's not too many pages, but I guess we'll save it for another day. So that'll be it for this video. Bye guys, keep reading.